What a wonderful introduction to the entertainment portion of our show. I'd like to welcome everyone here today on the occasion of the 150th anniversary of West Plains. Our program today will be a number of speakers who are reminiscing about West Plains, interspersed with music by the Splinters. Their first number will be Écossaise from 1806 by Beethoven. Our first story about West Plains is a story about Reverend Schofield, who was minister here at the Little White Church during the First World War. He lived with his wife and daughter at the parsonage at Freeman Station, which was just west of Brant Street on Old Plains Road. His daughter recounted that her family had never had a horse before, but her father inherited a horse named Fanny that had been passed down from minister to minister. Fanny was a high-stepping horse, but did most of her stepping in the same spot. She was described as the slowest moving horse people had ever seen, which must have made for a long Sunday, since at the time West Plains was part of a 3-point charge. Morning services were held at West Plains, an afternoon service at East Plains, and an evening service at Appleby. The Schofield's daughter Bartle married a local boy, and her new father-in-law handcrafted our pulpit. It was made of solid walnut from a tree on the banks of the Grand River at York. The wood was seasoned in his barn for 40 years. The pulpit consists of 273 pieces, which were hand-cut and patiently fitted together. Once completed, it was taken to a firm in Dundas for finishing and varnish. Bartle and her husband, Ross Peart, had the Christian Education Center at East Plains named after them. Our next number is Humoresque from 1894 by Dvorak.
Thank you. When Marilyn said that she had to look up some documents for our 150th anniversary of the church, she managed to find my baptism certificate, or wedding certificate. I didn't really feel that these were appropriate as historical artifacts.
Yeah, they are.
But here we are. It was 1995, well, a little bit of my family's background. My grandfather helped build this church, and there's some picture around here somewhere where he was shown laying the cornerstone. Actually, he was the superintendent of Sunday schools. It was plural because, of course, there was a boys' Sunday school and a girls' Sunday school because you dare not mix them. My mother was a Sunday school teacher, and I think my mother and father were both married here. And like I said, Nora and I were married too. My mother and father were married. And in 1995, my uncle George Goodbrand wrote this article for it was an anniversary of West Plains, so rather than me rewriting the history, I would like to read it for you. The story of West Plains Church began a long time ago, 1871 to be exact, which is just 40 years after Confederation of Canada. The first members met in a little schoolhouse, which is located next to the present church site. In 1872, the congregation was named Plains West, part of Burlington Plains Parish of the Methodist Episcopal Church. In 1875, William Henry donated a choice piece of land, upon which a one-room structure was erected, seating 90 persons. The cost to build was $400. And that's the little white church, which is the top church there in the first poster. And in 1878, it opened its doors to the people of the area. In 1930, this building was moved to Spring Garden Road, and to this time, it is still in use as a private residence. In 1884, the first union of the Methodist Church took place, and there were 25 members in Plains West Church at that time. Through the turn of the century, the congregation began to grow. In 1925, the union of the Methodist, Congregational, and Presbyterian churches took place, and West Plains United Church came into being. It was ideally located, surrounded by rich market gardens. The farmers noted for their tomatoes, melons, small fruits, apples, and cherries, etc. In 1928, the congregation was discussing enlarging the frame structure or building a new church. At the Easter services in 1929, the congregation voted to build a new church, and plans were made. Things don't move that quickly nowadays. What was it like in this community in 1929? There certainly have been many changes, but it is still today relatively the same. A quiet area of Burlington. There was no Royal Botanical Gardens next door, and the houses next to the church were not built yet. The highway was much closer to the church, but the traffic, of course, was much lighter. There was no 403 or 401 highway. The number 2 highway, which passes in front of the church, was the road to Toronto, not only from Hamilton, but also London, Windsor, and the United States. The distinguishing landmark of the community was the Nielsen sign, which sat on a small hill in the Bridgeview area. The sign could be seen for miles and was known to people far and wide. Holy Sepulchre Cemetery has always been on the property across the highway from the church. Proceeding east towards Burlington were continuous market gardens, probably one of the richest market garden areas in Canada. Houses were sparsely spaced along the highway. The churches at that time were St. Matthew's Anglican Church, East Plains United Church, and we were part of the 2 Point Charge with East Plains. Fairfield Public School had opened in 1913, but there was no high school, and students generally traveled by bus to Waterdown. The area was composed of small communities: Bridgeview, Plainsview, Brighton Beach, Aldershot, Campbell's Corners, Filman's Corners, Freeman, etc. When you spoke of Burlington in 1929, you were probably referring to the 5 or 6 blocks on Brant Street near the lake, as the rest of Brant Street was market gardens. If you consider that this present church was built and paid for during the Depression years, you truly appreciate the effort put forth by the original congregation of this building. In June 1930, the cornerstone was laid and the church dedicated. Sunday, September 21st, 1930. West Plains United Church was dedicated to the glory of God and God's work in this community. The young minister who served West Plains at this great event was the late Reverend Dr. Sidney B. Stokes, who recently passed away at age 102. In 1940, the mortgage was burned. The congregation continued to grow with additions made to the church in 1962 and 68. During the same period, a manse was built. During those years, the congregation was large and the church was bustling with activities: adult, youth, Sunday school. Of course, there have been interruptions in the life of the congregation. Most recently, in 1990, Reverend Dr. Graham Tipple, retired minister at Ryerson Church in Lancaster, joined us as interim minister for 2 years, and in 1992 we were helped financially by Halton Presbytery. The great faith, determination, and dedication of the congregation came to the fore during those 2 years. In 1993, Reverend Norma Harder answered our call to West Plains United Church, the first woman minister to serve in this church. Under Norma's leadership, the church is continuing to grow. An exceptional musical program, a youth choir, reorganization of the Sunday school. This is a happy, joyous, and challenging time for West Plains. Richly blessed, strongly led, and with a great expression of faith. George Goodbread. Thank you.
Our next musical number is Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen, which is an African-American spiritual song that originated during the period of slavery, but was not published until 1867. I'd now like to call upon Linda, please.
This is a story that really provided for me. As Peter said, Reverend Stokes and his wife were here in the 30s during the Depression years. So Mrs. Stokes provided this information for us. During the General Council meeting, there was a plea for a minister to go to Spirit River in the Peace River country. Mr. Casimir volunteered, and he had dinner with us the night before he left, she said. We told him we would do all we could to assist him. When he wrote and told us of the plight of these people, the ladies at West Plains decided to send a bale of clothing and bedding to help out. 4 of them made a quilt out of men's trousers. It was the funniest quilt you ever saw, but it would keep someone warm. 2 years later, when the Stokes were living in Niagara Falls, a family moved in next door, and a lady was putting some bedding on the clothesline to air. I could hardly believe my eyes, said Mrs. Stokes. There couldn't possibly be 2 quilts like that. I went next door to welcome our new neighbor, and she said they had just moved from Spirit River. She said their minister, Mr. Passmore, had come from somewhere in Ontario, and a church there had sent him clothing and quilts during the Depression, and he had given her the quilt that hung on the line. So I told her the whole story from the beginning, where it left from West Plains and traveled around back to Niagara Falls. Now, I have to get a word in for the UCW, of course, and here it is. In an inaugural service of the United Church of Canada in 1925, the music that was sung here were these. All the musicians will have to answer a question after I read these. When mothers of Salem, he leadeth me, when he cometh, faith of our fathers, all things bright and beautiful, and Jesus, friend of little children. 2 of these are no longer in the hymn book. Who knows which 2 they are? Leanne? Right, when Mothers of Salem is long gone. Anyone else? Yes, who said that? Martha, yes. 2 correct answers. When he cometh. What's the other one? Now these are just a little tidbits of things that have come up through the years. In 1930, the Ladies' Aid paid $15.75 for a gas stove for the kitchen. The minister's salary was $666 for the year. How do you like that, Bill? In 1948, the total membership at West Plains was 202, of whom 138 were Sunday school children. This is a quote from the 1950 annual report. The regular systematic use of weekly offering, both black and red sides, will solve all our problems of local finances, especially for Margaret. Does anybody know who Margaret was in 1950? I don't think Margaret Cook was on finance then. Anyway, in 1951, the quote from the annual report was, by resolution of the official board and confirmed at the annual meeting, it was decided not to publish individual givings in this year's printed report. So until then, everybody knew what you were giving. In 1957, the Women's Association and the Women's Missionary Society amalgamated in order to increase interest in mission work. They had 88 members divided into 6 groups. Now, these were their projects for that year. First, to purchase nesting tables and chairs for the Sunday school. Second, paint the interior of the church. These were ladies. Lay new carpet throughout the building. Cater to the men's club dinners. Cater to the Ministerial Association dinner. Conduct the harvest tea and the bake sale. And contribute $190 to missions. Marjorie Windsor was the president that year, and Red Swire was the treasurer. I believe Red Swire is still contributing to this church, even though she is in a residence now for older folks. In 1962, the WA and the WMS joined to become the UCW. So for 56 years, our West Plains congregation has been supporting the UCW. All those years, Mary made music and the rest made meat pies. On March the 30th, 2019, 5 of our members attended the final Halton Presbytery meeting at Tansley United when Halton Presbytery joined the Horseshoe Falls Regional UCW Council. Thank you.
Our next number is Any Dream Will Do from Joseph, for those of us who remember our own production in 2008.
Firstly, I'd just like to thank Ray and Marilyn for asking Marnie and I to share a little bit of our family history and tradition here at West Plains. After looking at homes in Ancaster and Burlington, our parents, Marion and Fred, were encouraged to move to Aldershot by friends Emily and Sid Bibby, who at the time was president of CHCH-TV, and Emily, a longtime member here at West Plains United Church. Our parents loved Aldershot and made many, many friends and connections over the years. So began their membership here at West Plains in 1957. Our dad had been brought up in Zion United Church in Hamilton, and our mom was brought up in St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church in Fergus. Mom converted to the United Church and often joked that she came over to the dark side, especially coming from Fergus. That same year I was born and baptized by the late Reverend Alan McQuaig. His picture is among those in the gallery upstairs. Alan and his wife Elizabeth were lifelong friends of our parents. Alan went on from West Plains to be a minister in a 2,200 congregation in Orillia and later an even larger one in Toronto. We have maintained a friendship with his wife, who we know as Bonnie, and over the years. And just this past week, she celebrated her 93rd birthday in Prescott, Ontario. And even more exciting, she just finished publishing her second book at the age of 93. And it is a collection of letters that important people over the course of the United States and Canada sent to people and kept over the years. And so she published a book of all those letters. Her first book was a cookbook, which she wrote when she was in Orillia, so that would have been 1960. But there were a few people from this congregation whose recipes were in that book. And we are so lucky to have a signed copy of that book. She was delighted to know that we're celebrating this Sunday, our 150th birthday in style at West Plains, as she had very, very fond memories of West Plains. During this time, the church was a going concern, a very hot spot in Aldershot. Kids of all ages and stages came here. 2 years later, in 1959, Marnie came along and was baptized by the late Reverend William Petherick. Our parents became very active at West Plains during this time and continued their journey of faith through many ways. Dad became the clerk of session here and was a steadying and positive influence on much that happened here at West Plains for the next 40 plus years. He had a natural ability to lead, a large dose of common sense, and what I would call a very normal way of looking at life. He chaired many pastoral relations committees, as they were known when they called ministers to West Plains. Reverend Martin Rule, husband of our very own Julie Rule, was one of those ministers. Dad always welcomed people who were new to West Plains with his characteristic, friendly, outgoing personality. He would know their names by the end of the service, call them, and encourage them to come again, which many did for many years. He always wanted to encourage folks to work together for a bright future here. He had a wonderful sense of humor and liked nothing better than having some very mischievous fun, sometimes at the minister's expense. Anybody wants to know, I'll tell you some of those stories later. During this time, there were numerous social functions here, dances, shows, fashion shows, barbecues, young people's groups that kept this place hopping. It was just not our church, but a community church for all who lived in the West End of Aldershot. Mom was a rock who was with her quiet determination, led in her own way. She was in the choir for more than 40 years. She loved every minute of it. The friends she made in the choir were lifelong friends. Mom was very musical. She sang soprano, mezzo-soprano, and when needed, alto. She loved and appreciated Leanne. Few knew she was such an accomplished musician herself, often taking the lead in high school musicals, a member of the Bach-Elder Choir in Hamilton while training as a nurse. Mom took organ lessons so she would play it properly, with all the stops. She took on the organ lead for many summers so that the choir director at the time could take some much-needed rest. Many dinners were prepared for, baking for funeral receptions, wedding receptions, and UCW meetings. She would always be so well prepared for her turn to do the program for UCW. She was also artistic. She was the flower convener for many years and so enjoyed the flower table at Christmas bazaars. She and Pat Beveridge would scour the year long to find interesting old vases to prepare arrangements out of found materials. I remember vividly scaling a cliff near Coutts Paradise for precious bittersweet. Marnie and I, of course, went to Sunday school and youth group, and many of the folks in the pictures here today were our teachers. We loved the fun, seeing our friends, and tried very hard to remember our catechism teachings during the week. Not always successful. In those days, brownies and guides were held here. Here, children of all faiths and beliefs came together and learned Christian values and teachings to live by. During subsequent years, Marnie and I had opportunities to be in the junior choir, take our turn with our nursery duties, teach Sunday school ourselves. We attended church as well as Sunday school and came to know the beliefs of the United Church and become members here ourselves. Our parents continued to participate to encourage our little church to flourish, as so did so many, like Sharon Short, who's here today, and her parents, Harvey and Barb Johnson. So glad that Sharon was able to come today to represent them. Our mom and dad would be so pleased to know that Marnie and I are still, after all these years, here at West Plains and are actively involved. As you know, I have taken on being the clerk of the congregation. What an honor. They would be so pleased to know that West Plains has continued to thrive despite unforeseen worldwide health and economic challenges facing individuals and organized religious groups and congregations. They would be so happy to know that we are embracing technology here at West Plains to reach beyond our concrete walls. Our parents encouraged us to take typing in high school, which, as they knew, would be important to our future, were they ever wise. Our mom learned how to email in her late 80s. The world was getting smaller and she wanted to be included. She was interested in what was going on in the community, our country, and had a very global view of world affairs. West Plains was a very significant part of our family history. It continues to be important to both Marnie and I in friendship and Christian education. Our wish for West Plains is a happy and fulfilling future of growth, teamwork, exploration of new ideas, ventures, and potential.
Our next song is You Raised Me Up, a favorite song of many folk at West Plains. Our final scheduled speaker is a lady who always has a song in her heart. Mary Starr, please.
Not as long as I used to be. Anyway. Oh, I never use this. Oh, thank goodness. It's not that loud, is it? Anyway, I'm so delighted to be here. And really, I'm not speaking about myself, although I could tell you a lot of things. I call Joanne Beth, and I'm sure you all know Joanne from many years, and she's been here at this church when I came, a great singer, and I asked her if she had some memories, and I'm really not prepared for this, but bear with me. She sent me on the email things that she remembered, and she's here today, so Joanne, correct me if I've got it wrong. I did call her and I said, can you give me some history? So this is what she said. My brother Wayne was christened in 1940, and I just drew up pictures of Mom and Dad and the minister at the front steps. It must have been quite cold as they were all bundled up. I think back and I appreciate the men. My dad, Glenn Hopper, I'm sure you remember Gina. Gina ran I shouldn't say ran, she ran the ceremonies for years in here. And my children all took part in that. Dad and Glenn Hopper doing the mass and church repairs. There were 50 or so kids in the junior choir with Ethel Gilmar. She worked with the children doing plays. I remember doing Robin Hood. And I remember having confirmation in the church. I think there were 13 kids or so. There were church dances in the basement. I remember taking a look at the little ones in the nursery downstairs, looking after them. And also Sunday school. Sunday school was at the back part of the church, sectioned off with those sliding doors. And the minister's office was up the narrow steps in the bell tower, and then it was moved to where Leanne's office is now located. And I was blessed to be monitored by so many wonderful people. And then I asked her about the choir, which is where I think I've spent most of my time here. Either that, with the women here are always doing things for the women. Remember that. She told me anyway that Mrs. Vincent was the organist. Anybody remember her? Apparently she had braces on her legs, but she was still able to play the organ. And then I asked her if she could remember the organist names, if I forget names, and she remembered, back here. was another organist, but I can't remember his name, a young man. And then we were blessed with this Deanne here, who has been here for, I don't know, many years. Half your life. Anyway, she has been wonderful. To go back to Joanne, sorry. She said she played the cornet. And that was way back, I guess. She said it was a threesome. Mom was ill then, and the music was My Saving Grace. I remember I was 13 playing Jerusalem with the organist. And there, of course, there were scout and guide parades here at the church, lots of cherished memories and people. Remember collecting conkers. Anybody know what conkers are? The chestnuts. Yeah. And of course, the chestnut tree here at West Plains was the best supply. I can remember that too from my own kids. They were here for scouts and everything else. This has been such a wonderful church. I came here in '67, welcomed, two ladies came to the house to welcome me. Oh yes, we hear that you are Delta, you're from Delta United. And of course I was involved there. Basically, I've always been involved in the choir somewhere, I think from the age of 4. Anyway, it has been my life here, and I've enjoyed it so much here. And this has really nothing to do with what you want to know, but I just love being here at West Plains for 67 anyway, we came here. And you've all been so great, and it's a wonderful church to be. It's just that it's sad that life has changed. Thank you very much.
We're going to close with the Radetzky March, Op 228. It's a march composed by Johann Strauss Sr., dedicated to Field Marshal Joseph Radetzky von Radetz. First performed on August 31st, 1848 in Vienna. It is always played to end the famous New Year's Day concert in Vienna, with the audience encouraged to applaud the arrival of another new year. the Splinters. The Splinters are a group based in Dundas. All are members of the Dundas Valley Orchestra. The Splinters are, from left to right, violinists Ron Seeley, Brenda Hurlbert, Christine Duncan, Dorothy Hartman, Suzanne Lindsay, with Jim Jones on viola, and our own Leanne Tan on cello. And that ends the entertainment portion of today, and happy anniversary, West Florence.
The dishes part.
On the honey table are some anniversary bookmarks you're welcome to enjoy. Thank you.